Welcome everyone to my loft, Rusty Blackwood, and as I say, I welcome you to my loft on this September 18th, 2023 video. Today I'm doing this video in honor of my mom, Norma Irene Weber Beecroft, who passed away 8 years ago this date at actually I think it was 20 minutes past 1 this morning. And so for me, as you could imagine, it's kind of a bittersweet day for me, more sad than sweet. This is my mom right here. Hopefully I can bring it and show you without too much of a glare on the screen. This is my momma. Try to keep it straight here. Yes, this was taken, I think Mama was about 83, 84 in this picture, somewhere in that time frame. My mom was blessed with youth. She always looked at least 10 years younger than she actually was, and she had the vitality to go with that, and she was never one to admit defeat in anything that she ever took on. She was very regimented in her outlook. She was a staunch conservative. It's so funny when I think about it. My parents raised both my brother and I to think for ourselves, listen to the platforms, weigh the odds, and decide for yourself who you think is going to do the best job, if possible, for you, like where you live and your life, and which we did. But Mama always made it a point to sort of slip it in there, but make sure it's conservative. She was raised a staunch conservative. Her father was a staunch conservative, and amazingly so, my dad's father was a staunch liberal. So how those two ever really got together is beyond me, but they did, and they had my brother in 1943, and they had me in 1949, and Mom used to talk about a lot of different aspects and things, about the way she looked at things, and she would always have an opinion, and she very rarely she very rarely ever veered from that opinion. And it definitely might not have been the opinion of other people around her, but she would not give in, not one iota. She would not give. If she was decided on something, she stuck to it like glue. She saw it through to the end, and she would cope with whatever that ending brought her, and whether it was what she had hoped it would bring her or whether it wasn't, she persevered, and she would work with it. In other words, there's so many times that when this day comes, I really do reflect on my life and a lot of things that happened through the 40 years I had my mother. Um, I had, well, more than 40 years. I mean, come on. I had my dad, my mother 40 years longer than I had my father. My father passed in 1975, February the 1st, 1975. I was 25 at that time. And my mom passed away at 93 in 2015. I mean, had she lived until Christmas Day of that year, she would have turned 94. And Mama's birthday was Christmas Day, December 25th, and imagine being born. She always said she was in great company, and I know what she meant, but still, I would have given anything to have been able to see her turn 100. For so many years, I thought that Mama would make it to 100, and but I guess that wasn't the plan, and I think 93 was nothing to be ashamed of, and Mama did not have the easiest life. She worked very hard, and labor, not behind a desk or anything like that. This was physical labor where she used her body, she worked her body, and she did what she had to do. And as I say, she raised my brother and I. She was a farm wife, and then as the years went by, I mean, Rick and I were grown and gone by that time, and Mom worked in the tobacco industry, as the neighborhood where I grew up, where we lived. There was quite a few tobacco growers that lived there, and Mama had employment with them too, in particular, and so I would say out of those two, one primarily, but she did work at the second as well, and I can remember as I was living back at home at the time Mom was working in tobacco, and oh my, she was so done in when she would get home from work, and this was after my dad passed away, and so there wasn't a heck of a lot of means. In other words, Mama had to work, and excuse me, and so she did, and she did the best that she could, and I would contribute however I could, monetarily and work-wise around the house to help her out the best I could, and because this was when I was separated for the very first time from my second husband, and we had been married for 10 years, and we came apart for 13 months, and during that time my two sons and I lived at Mom's, and the boys, of course, were in school, and at that time I was working, the family band, the Midnight Ramblers, were still playing at that time. They played for about a year following Dad's passing, and then they disbanded, and we all, we were all close relatives. We were, my brother and I, and three of our first cousins who were brothers to each other. These were sons of my dad's twin brother. And so, you know, I worked at whatever through that period of time. I worked as a waitress, and then I became a supervisor, and Mama was working in tobacco, like through the season that would start in the spring with planting, and then maintenance like hoeing, which is removing weeds and things that from the rows of tobacco. And there was, let me see, what was some other aspects of it that Mama did. There was replanting, where she had to carry what they called a jack planter, and it was an awkward mechanism that looked something like a bicycle pump in a way, and you put the plant in it, inserted the plant where if one after planting wasn't growing very well or needed to be replaced for whatever reason, then the ones who were working at this walked up and down the rows of tobacco, and wherever plants, they had to carry a bag on one shoulder that had the plants in it, and then they carried this jack planter in their other hand, that so that they could work it, and then they'd pull out the dead plant or wherever they were replacing, and then insert the new plant into this jack planter, and it would go down this tube thing. It would hold it in place with the roots at the bottom, and you just make sure that the hole that the plant was going to go in was opened enough, and they had to push down on this lever thing, and it put the plant right down in the ground again. And when you release the jack planter, the soil, it caused the soil to all come back in around the plant, and then the plant was good to go, hopefully, you know. And most of the time they were fine. They did take. And then another job Mama did, I never worked in jack planting, and I never even worked in planting. And I did work in hoeing, which was a hot, dirty, thankless job. Really and truly it was, but it was something that needed to be done. And then Mama did what they called oiling, where they had to put this, it was like carried like this mechanism, this big oil thing that would cause, and that would make oil go down the plant. And I must admit to my ignorance here, I really don't know the reasoning behind that particular procedure. Then there was topping, where you went along, because the tobacco plants would grow. It was like a flower from the top of the plant, and of course, like in anything, there would be suckers come along the plant as well, and the flower at the top and the suckers growing along the side of the plant would take the goodness, the strength out of the tobacco plant itself, where the strength needed to go into the leaves, and because that is what's taken off the plant and cured and made into cigarettes. And if it's burley tobacco or a different type of tobacco, therefore cigars and different things. But the tobacco that Mom worked in and that I did was for cigarettes. And so those that were working in topping would have to go down the rows and snap off the flowers at the top of the plant, and take the suckers off, and they would just drop them on the ground, because they would just become compost and rot into the ground. And then in harvest time, that's when the tobacco was harvested and taken off, and Mom worked in that, and I worked in that for one season. I possibly might have done two, but I'm just really recalling one season that I worked in that, and that was more modernized. I remember I did work for a while in the old way of handing leaves to the tire that tied them up on the stick that was taken off and put up in the tobacco kiln to cure out. And but then it became more modernized, and there was the table that you took from the baskets that were put up in front of you, or I think no, they were beside. I think you took some plants and put them up along the top, but you could just pull them down onto the stick. There was the bottom, and then the stick, and then the top layer of leaves. And then they would go down underneath. It was like a sewing needle that went along and and attached them on, and then they went up a conveyor belt into the tobacco kiln, and then the kiln hanger that's up in the kiln takes them off and puts them up into the notches inside too, and they're going to be cured. And then after that, after everything is cured in the fall, everything is taken out and put in the pack barn, and then they begin their grading, the different grades, and they used to call it stripping. Some of these words I know show you where your mind is. And then they would be graded as to whether the different grades that would be used for, I suppose, what was going to be able to be used and what was going to be discarded and things like that. And that was a really dirty, messy job too. An awful lot of dust in the air, and Mom worked in that, and then of course throughout the winter time, there was nothing going on until the next spring, when they were steam the greenhouses to disinfect them, and then put the plants in to grow, to be planted into the fields. And sometimes Mom would assist with that, and other times she would just wait until planting time actually began. And so in the meantime, she because she was like a seasonal worker, she was entitled to unemployment for the off season to carry her through. And so that's what she would do. And she did that for many, many, many years. And too long, really. I think that's what contributed to my mother's, she developed arthritis extremely bad in her legs. And not her arms so much. There were days that she had discomfort there, but it was mainly in her legs. And I think that came from all the years of standing in the grating tobacco in the fall. I mean, she did have a carpet, a piece of carpet she put down on the cement floor, and she would wear her winter boots, of course, but still there's enough cold that permeates the soles of the boots and comes up the legs and things like that. And I mean, there was heat in there, but still, it certainly wasn't like your living room. And I think overall, I think that's what contributed to my mom developing arthritis so badly in her legs. And of course, Mom developed osteoporosis, and so she had osteoarthritis. And trying to cope with this day after day after day. And but I was blessed to have such a wonderful mom. I mean, my mom was very strict. With my mother, she would, I remember growing up, she'd tell you once, she might tell you twice. But if you didn't pay attention, or you didn't do what you were being asked to do, you soon found out where that got you. And so you may as well do it the first time it was asked, because it was going to be a lot less, a lot less dramatized, let's put it that way. And so, but oh my, she was, as strict as she was so protective of me, and her grandchildren. Oh, she was. My mom was a real spitfire when it come to her grandchildren, and in time, her great-grandchildren. Nobody had better look in the wrong way towards them, because my mom would be, she would be just like a pit bull, and she was that way with me, of course, protecting me. She was, I remember my husband and I were, she knew was going to be going to court, this when she was in the hospital, just actually the day before she passed. She had had a blockage in her bowel, and as I said, she was 93, and this was in September. I believe the surgery was September she died on the 18th, and the surgery was 3, possibly 4 days, if my memory serves me, before she passed. And she had to have a section, a couple of inches of bowel removed, and that had just disintegrated, and she did rally for a while, and it looked like, she was going to be okay. And but I guess that wasn't in the plans. But I remember her the day before she passed. She had a good day, and I was there with her, and I was sitting on the bed, and I had brushed her hair and helped freshen her up a little bit, and we were talking, and she'd had some visitors. She'd had a couple of her sisters come in to see her and visit with her, and my brother was in and out, and a few of Rick's grandchildren had come and gone, and my boys were, of course, home here in St. Catharines. I mean, life had to continue. They had been to see her at an earlier time. This was even before she was in the hospital. And so, but they weren't there. It was just me, and we were talking, and she knew that Doug and I were going to be going back to court, and this was supposed to be for the last time, to get things settled once and for all. And my husband and I, we aren't divorced. We are legally separated, so we are legally free of each other. It's just, we're just married in name only, and it's as close to being single as you can get without going through a divorce. And there's never been any reason to apply for a divorce, and because he's free to do as he wants, I'm free to do as I want. And the only way that would change is if one of us met somebody that we wanted to marry. God forbid that ever happened again. I mean, I've done it twice, and I've been a failure both times, and so that would be the last thing that I would want to do again. I admire these people that can get married 7, 8 times, like applaud Elizabeth Taylor. It was 8 times for her. And by heavens, I give her, mind you, she married Burton, whatchamacallit, her husband that she had married twice, and Richard Burton, I finally get it, and but still, holy cow, and but I guess, if a relationship is meant to be and to stay, it will. And if it's not meant to, it's going to come apart and it's going to dissolve. And you know, it's so that's that. And so, as I say, Mama and I were talking about the court, and she knew that we were going to be going back because we hadn't been. Doug and I had not. It had not been a good breakup, and my mom basically was almost like my champion in a way. She was always there to help and however she could and things like that, and so she was getting upset because she knew that this was going to be happening again, and it was making her upset, and it was making me upset because it wasn't the fact of what I'd been going through with Doug. It was watching my mother trying to recuperate from this major surgery that she'd had at 93 years old, and weakened, so weakened down. That she was trying to support me and defend me and worrying about me instead of worrying about herself. It was difficult. You know, I had to try to get her calmed down, and I won't say what she said because I'm positive God would forgive her because He understood what was going on, and the reason behind it all, and so so that was that, and so the next day I was staying at my mother's apartment, and it was very close. It was in walking distance to the hospital in St. Thomas, and so Mama wasn't having a good day the day that she passed, and she was losing her oxygen. The oxygen was being depleted in her blood, and they were trying to give her oxygen, and it was cold, and she was cold, and I was trying to get her to understand that she had to keep the mask on for the oxygen, and my brother was there too, and oftentimes Mama, throughout my brother and I's lives, I always felt that she favored my brother. But it was just the way I felt, and that she would listen to him before me, and she was fighting the staff and the nurses and things like that, and so Rick would try to calm her down, and he really wasn't getting anywhere. And so, yeah, he keep telling me, you know, come on, little sis, you see what you can do. Well, I tried my best, and she would, you know, she'd grab a hold of, and she'd hang on, and so this was the way it was, and I stayed there until, I don't know, 11:30, something like that, and I wasn't getting much sleep these nights that I was up there, and I had to coming back to St. Catharines and driving back and forth and things like that, and I should have just stayed there all the time. I should have just slept in the chair in the hospital, whatever. If I had it to do again, that's what I would do. But these are things you don't know, and And so you just do the best you can to cope however you can. And so Rick was still there, and he had to drive home, which to Dutton it's about 22 miles away, 22-mile drive. And so he told me, you go back to Mom's and get yourself some sleep, and I'll stay for a little while, and then I'm going to go. Well, I guess he only stayed for, like, I left and went back to Mom's, and he only stayed for about maybe half an hour, something like that. And so he went home, and excuse me here, and so I went back to Mom's, and I had just laid down for a little while, and the phone rang, and it was the hospital calling to tell me that Momma had just passed, and that was about 25 minutes past 1 in the morning that they called me and said that she had just passed. And I was alone there, and I called Rick. I called my brother to let him know, and there was nothing to be done at that point in time. And you know, it was just so odd, because I remember that night sitting there and looking. I went outside Mom's building, sat on the steps, and looking over at the hospital, and I was debating, should I go? Should I? You know, I should have been there. I should have been there with her when she passed. And I've never forgiven myself for not being there, that she had to. Neither Rick or I were there, and she had to pass over without one of us there. And I've asked God many times, forgive me for that, and asked my mother, forgive me for that. The only good thing I can say that came out of that was the fact I never had to see my mother deceased. I never saw my mother again from that very last time I saw her before I left to go back to her place at the night she passed, that morning, you know, before it became morning. And I can still recall my father, because my dad had a traditional funeral, and seeing him in the coffin and feeling the coldness and everything, and I've never forgot that. So in a way, it was a blessing that I never had to see my mother that way. My mom she had requested to be cremated and no funeral, and just a celebration of life at a later time, and that's what happened. And when these kind of things happen, and you go through them after the fact, and you look back, you can see things from a different point of view, in a different light, and you could think like, wait, I should have done this, or I should have done that, but there's no second chances. You have one chance, and if you mess that chance up, you don't get a second. And but I know that my mom is content, and my mom is in a by far better place. I've oftentimes said, with the way things are in the world, thinking, you know, like being able to wish her back, or my dad. But I'm glad that either of them are not here to witness what is going on. They would be, especially my mother, because she would become so emotional and so involved. Maybe that's where I get that from. I don't know. But she would just be beside herself with worry about her family, not herself. It was never herself that she was afraid for, that she was concerned about. And I oftentimes wish that she could have been more concerned for herself. So in that respect, I'm glad that she's not having to be here to cope with the way things are. And I wanted to wear this necklace today with butterflies, because butterflies are the sign of life. And when you see butterflies flying around, flitting from here to there, know that they are carrying life and bringing life. And so when you see one, smile, because they are the bringer of life. And so I see on my clock here that it's well past my 30-minute mark. I was going to do a short reading here for Mom from a couple of my books that she had, but I'll leave that for maybe another time. And tomorrow, before I close this video, tomorrow you've heard me speak of my cousin Harold Baycroft. He was the drummer in the family band, the Midnight Ramblers. And Harold passed away, it will be 1 year tomorrow on the 19th. He was 89, and Harold was almost like a second dad to me. He was quite a bit older than me, and all those years in the band, he always was my protector. He used to watch over me. At times he used to make me disgusted at some of the things that he did, but that was the typical guy type of thing, thinking they're being smart, and whereas in reality they're not. But anyway, that was neither here nor there. This guy looked after me more times than not, and I never realized how much his passing would affect me. And so Harold, there you are, buddy. And I hope that you're having yourself a good time. And until we meet again. And we will all meet again. I definitely and thoroughly believe that we all will be together again. And so, here's to you, Mama, and to you, Harold, and to Dad, Uncle Bill, Grandma and Grandpa, both sides, to all of you. Cheers. And so, I will be back again soon with a new video, and hope that you've kind of enjoyed what I've spoken about. It helps me to talk about things. If you can talk about things and talk about your feelings and let them out of you, you will find that you can cope with whatever comes your way much better than if you keep everything bottled up and you don't talk about it and you try to ignore it and think it's going to go away, and that's when it does the exact opposite, and it festers, and before you know it, you're ill, or you're in a situation where you don't need to be, and things can go from bad to worse. So Thank you. Thank you to all of you out there for listening to me and for tuning into my videos and continuing to support me and my work however you can. And excuse me, it means so very, very much. And thank you so much to all those who have subscribed, all my new subscribers. Please know how touched I am and how appreciative I am of your support for me. So please like this video, please share it around, please comment it if you would, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I will see you all again soon. God's blessings to each of you. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now. Peace out.